Cafe Conversations by Nikki King and Kate Tucker has been created to be of service to the collective consciousness. It is our intention to create a simple and accessible portal for transformation, a place where stories, beliefs, and triggers can be held in unjudged love, a space where truth is ever-changing. These conversations are spoken from integrity and are brought forth to invite the listener to have an experience of themselves that allows for reflection, change, and expansion. Our singular desire is to invite the collective to wander more freely and fearlessly. It is ultimately about love. Please do not listen to this podcast whilst driving or operating machinery.
Feels like a really beautiful place to start, actually, in the stillness.
So fitting with you about to do a workshop on stillness.
It feels like it's been such a, I don't want to say chaotic in the sense of, but it has felt chaotic in that it feels like there's just been energies flying around all over the place, especially for the last month. And so coming into April, still with energies feeling like they're kind of zooming around, it feels really important to honour that space of stillness, actually. So
important. So important. It's integration is something that I think collectively, probably partly because of the suppression of the feminine, is something that we don't allow in our lives very much. Because we like to do, and yet the arrival that happens in integration is so important. And there's been many healings I've done in my life that I didn't get the fullness of them, because I went straight into the next healing or the next course or the next thing, rather than allowing the honouring of that healing through integration.
And actually what I've really been experiencing and allowing myself to experience to a level and a depth that I haven't before is of the importance of rest. And, I've always seen, or for a long time, I've seen tiredness and the need to rest as weakness, as I'm not doing something right, or I'm not clearing my energy well enough, or I'm not doing enough spiritual practices to allow me to keep going, to keep doing. And what I'm really recognising and have recognised so much this last month is the importance, the value, and that actually rest is doing. It is an action, and it's vital.
It's a vital action, totally vital. And what I try, tiredness has one of those, it has quite a lot of negative attachment to it, like weakness. And I always try and translate that to myself as restfulness.
Yeah.
Because actually tiredness is your body speaking to you and letting you know that it's time for rest. And to not listen to our bodies is at the cause of so much ill health and stress and disharmony. You know, our bodies will tell us how to be harmonious, how to be happy. You know, you can't be happy if you're tired. Like, I've seen, it's like kids when they're tired and they're just having a tantrum. If you're not listening to your body when it's tired and giving it the rest it needs, you're gonna be energetically tantruming through your life, you know?
And then what happens with that energetic tantruming is you stay tired.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting the respite, you're not getting the relaxed, you're not getting the rest. And so for me it became a perpetual, I'm tired of being tired. And I had to get to that point where it was just like being so bored of being tired that it's like, okay, what am I not giving myself? What am I not doing? And it was the rest. Which comes back to what you were talking about in terms of integration. It's like, if we don't rest, we don't integrate.
And the root word of integration is wholeness. So if we don't allow that rest, the healing, the action, the dreaming, all of it doesn't become whole. Like my guides often say that manifesting happens on your out breath, because even though the breathe in feels more active and is more active, the breath actually gives the body life, moves through the body on the out breath. And it's like that out breath is when everything you've intended and actioned and healed actually arrives. You know, actually the magic actually goes to work, the life force goes to work. And at the moment, certainly in the West, we're massively imbalanced in terms of how much we out breath compared to how much we in breath, you know, in our actions and our choices and our lifestyle. And I really think that the wisdom of our body, you know, our bodies really sleep for half the time. Like, we spend half the time awake and half the time asleep, and depending on daylight hours in nature, that changes. But I imagine if you added it up between winter and summer, if we actually slept with the daylight and the nighttime, it would work out that we spend half the time in deep out-breath of sleep and half the time in the deep action of being awake.
And actually this is what we touched on before we started recording, but you know, we were talking about how it feels like we are being, I want to say invited, but actually it feels more like a push. Sorry, universe, but it does feel like a push. It's like we are being pushed to find this balance. And it's like there's so much less room now for maneuver from one scale of that balance to the other, and it feels like, and especially as we're coming into April, and this idea of stillness, and whenever I think of stillness I always see like a plumb line running down through the middle of your being that then can have that gentle swing like a pendulum, but it's like actually it's that plumb line that creates the stillness, and that's the balance between the two. And this sense of how can we bring ourselves into more balance in order to find that stillness, in order to act from that place and not from a place of busy doing, busy thinking, busy reacting to, But that sort of intuitive, inspired action that for me at the moment is coming from a place of allowing myself to rest, be still, and then the action actually naturally comes.
So much comes when you allow yourself to be still. The inspiration that comes through stillness is quite amazing. One of the things that, as always, these conversations are so divinely timed, and one of the things that I think is so important about welcoming stillness and restfulness is it's the bringing back of the divine conversation with the body. And you know, interestingly, like the course that I'm running, we're on the Magdalena part of this divine feminine journey, and a lot of the women doing it were kind of expressing that they either didn't have a lover or they couldn't be with their partner, their sexual partner at the time of the Magdalene, and they're disappointed. And my guides just said, you think Tantra is about connecting to someone else? Tantra is about the divine conversation within yourself.
Yeah.
It's about learning to speak to yourself. And part of this tantric awakening that really is that push I feel like you're talking about from the universe is like, when are we all going to start listening to ourselves? Listening to the divine conversation that the body gives us every single moment. And then I think of how treacherous it is actually to ignore your body. You know, imagine if someone that you loved and lived with was desperately asking for something and you were just refusing to hear what was right for them because you thought better. How awful would that person feel? How much dis-ease would that cause within that relationship? And yet we do it to our own bodies.
Yeah. And as you started talking then, it's like I could feel the emotion in my body. It's like, well, goosebumps, but I can feel the emotion within that. And actually, you know, there's a voice, and it feels like my own as much as the collective, which is almost screaming at me. I mean, it's come to that level of the body desiring that level of attention now. It's like, you're right, we can't ignore it anymore. And we've been able to, you know, touch on it and to be able to kind of slowly peel back the layers. And it feels like now there's this arrow straight into the center of the being, and it's like my inner voice is screaming, which, as I say, is my own and the collective, which is like, don't ignore me, don't leave me out. It's like, hear me, listen to me. It's like, I have everything for you.
And actually with the higher energies, it's like the body's working even harder. You know, the body is going through the ascension process as much as the rest of our consciousness.
Yeah.
And is physically coping with all of this energetic vibrational change.
And the truth is, it's not even a don't leave me behind, it's like, you can't leave me behind. So it's like, if you want to have this experience of ascension, if you want to have an experience of the Magdalene energies that are around, if you want to have an experience of sacred sexual tantric life, it's like the body is the starting point. It's like, it's the fundamental piece within our human experience, is to have it within the human body. It's not, you know, we've all had it outside of ourselves. We've all experienced it, which is why we know it, and it's why the voice is so loud. It's like, we know it as an energy, as souls. and the invitation, the impetus, the this kind of deep calling now is experience it within the human body.
Yeah.
That's the invitation.
And that experience can be so sensual and so, multi-dimensional, great. Multi-sensory, that's when the party really gets good. That's when the party really gets delightful. And actually, my guys were talking about if you want to access the fifth dimension, you have to do it through the sensation body. You have to do it through being able to sense and connect to the delight and joy and bliss that is available in the present moment, but you can only do it if you can come into that bliss, and the only way you can is if the senses of the body are engaged.
And this comes back to what we've touched on before, but it's pleasure.
It's pleasure.
It's like, can we as beings, as human beings, allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to fully play and play full out, and to experience the level of pleasure that is available? And I can feel both the terror and the excitement within that. And this for me again is the balance. And it's like bringing those two together. It's like, are we allowing ourselves to do the work? And that means healing all of the trauma that we've experienced in order to create the space for the pleasure to be experienced. And this is the twofold experience that I feel we're now being given the space to experience a level that perhaps we haven't ever experienced before.
I totally agree with you. I feel like pleasure, from my experience of my own life and witnessing many, many people come into post-healing states of bliss and ecstasy and joy, the human collective find it harder to be in pleasure than they do in pain. We're not at a point yet where we feel we can accept and surrender into pleasure. And actually pleasure is in everything. My guides called me out a few days ago on, why do you not rest in pleasure? Why do you not find the pleasure and rest? You can rest, tick the box of rest, but you're not being present with the rest if you haven't found the pleasure in resting. And that's actually when tiredness becomes restfulness. When it stops being like, oh, I'm tired and this tiredness is blocking my life and stopping me doing what I need to do. And it becomes restfulness when you actually go, actually it's really pleasurable to stop, to become still, and again that's when all of the senses get engaged, is when you come into pleasure. All of the senses, inner and outer senses that we even have no names for, become engaged, and we become fully present and unjudged in what we're doing. And then the pleasure comes, whatever it is, whether it's rest, whether it's pain, whether it's a sexual human connection experience, whatever it is. And yet at the same time as we're talking, I can hear the collective consciousness expressing like, I can't just rest whenever I want. I can hear that expression of like, yeah, it's fine for you to say this. but it's like that I can't energy. It's like there's a I don't know how. And the life list coming through. You know, like it's almost like I can hear the collective consciousness response to this invitation to honour the needs of the body within myself and within, I'm sure, many other people listening to this.
And it's, you know, for me, it's become so clear why I've chosen to live my life the way I've chosen to, and part of that is to be a living example of what's possible. And when I say that, I mean it in the sense of, because in response to what you've just said, actually living the way people like you and I choose to live isn't necessarily easy. So in response to that collective, oh, it's okay for you, it's like, well, actually, living this way feels more natural. It feels more in tune with the environment, with nature, with the ebb and flow. And it's not easy when you're still living in a collective energy that says it's not okay, or that there's something wrong with it, or and I guess where I'm at is I want to be a living example to people that actually, if we shift that energetic balance to actually living more in our nature, living more innately with the ebb and flow, actually it's available to every single person. It isn't about that it's okay for some people and that it's available to everybody. And it's just about making that conscious shift into, okay, this is how I want to live my life.
And there, I feel you. And I feel like living in the ebb and flow, as you say, of the divine conversation, of nature happening inside the body. Means having to become unconditioned. It means having to learn what sacred selfishness is. And is living somewhat on the edge. It is not easy. But it is harmonious. And actually, rest does not have to. I find that even when I'm very busy, if I take 20 minutes or 15 minutes to rest because my body feels tired, I stop feeling as tired. So rest doesn't always have to be about I am cancelling my day and pretending I don't have children. And rest simply by honouring the body even for 5 minutes. I mean, a lot of the great geniuses like Einstein were famous at power napping for taking 5-minute bite-sized rest. And those bite-sized rest moments are as present and as useful as stopping everything.
And actually, I think that the difference in what I'm hearing as you're talking comes back to what you were saying about actually when we take pleasure in the rest and allow ourselves to take pleasure in the rest, the resistance goes. Therefore, the body is able to energetically revive itself
Mm-hmm.
in a really short space of time because we're not in resistance to it. If we're in resistance to the rest, then actually it doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
But when we allow ourselves the pleasure of the rest, be it 5 minutes or 5 hours,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we choose, then actually the body is given a message to say, this is yours.
Yeah. Where if you spend the whole time thinking about how you don't have time to do this rest, then you're not giving yourself, you're not gifting yourself that rest. In fact, rest is becoming part of what is stressing you out on your list of things to do, which I feel so deeply. Like, I have done it. I am still learning not to timetable rest into my life. And then I kind of feel like I want to come back to this idea of where this denial of pleasure is existing on the timeline consciousness, on the collective consciousness, because it feels like it's so important to explore why we are so shortchanged in pleasure collectively.
And what I can feel as you say that is, you know, the space between terror and pleasure is so close. It's almost like we don't know which side of the coin to flip onto because they're so closely aligned right now. I can feel that in my whole body. It's just like, actually, and it's almost like interesting talking about stillness. It's almost like we've become so stuck, and I don't want to use the words. Petrified. We've become so petrified that we've become literally like we can't move because we don't know whether we're going to fall into terror or fall into pleasure, and so we don't do either.
It's like frozen.
Yeah.
And then that comes to what my guides have been speaking so much about this year, which is that it is the numbness that needs to be healed, the part of you that is numb to that cry for rest, the part of you that is numb to the experience of pleasure and indeed the experience of pain. Because it's when I tune into the collective consciousness, especially the sacral energy, but in the vocal energy as well, and in the choices we're making, there is just this anesthesia, this ability to go numb, to go into the petrifiedness.
And actually, I really want to, it's interesting because whilst it's a flippant comment, it feels so, and I've not thought about this before, but it feels so aligned in terms of how many of us have used the excuse to not be intimate, to not experience sexual pleasure by simply saying, I'm tired, I'm too tired right now.
Wow.
And actually how much that's hiding has held so much of the trauma, so much of the pain, and has come out as, I'm too tired right now because I'm too tired to engage with my pain.
And my vulnerability.
And my vulnerability.
And my pleasure.
And my pleasure.
Wow. And it feels like this ability to be numb within divine conversation within in the self is something that we all collectively need to heal. Like I can almost feel my guides pushing me to say that healing the trauma is important, but healing the numbness is more important.
Yeah. Because actually what I'm feeling when you say that is actually how many of us have spent decades healing the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to invalidate or again be flippant with that, because actually it's been incredibly important. But as you say that, it's like actually this is the layer that feels so critical now.
So critical now.
Because it's almost as though we can bypass the numbness and go into the trauma and heal it.
Yeah.
And actually we're missing the very thing that's going to give us exactly what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we can continue to heal the trauma and go on and on and on, because actually in a way that's the safe option. And not healing the numbness, this ability to completely and utterly freeze out of the body, to leave the body on whatever level.
To disconnect from the present.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And I can actually feel that the trauma would heal so much more quickly if the numbness wasn't there, because actually you'd be in the pleasure of releasing the trauma, and that word wholeness would be engaged, which would mean that any trauma that needed to heal could heal so much more viscerally and fully and on a multi-layered.
And actually how much we can then, or how much quicker we can then let go of the story. It's like we don't need to attach to the story at all, because it can just heal. And I don't want to say that in a light dismissive way, but it does feel like an invitation to really tune into and tap into that which is really calling us right now.
And we've really been taught to numb pain.
Yeah.
You know, from the way we're treated, to when we're sick, to when we're giving birth, to we're taught to numb pain. And that numbing pain is how pain gets pushed down. And so it feels like the way to stop pushing the pain, you know, the way to stop the creation of trauma in a way is for the layer of numbness to be lifted, so all that was pushed down can come up and out.
And I also want to, and again say this really carefully, but it's that actually if we can allow the pleasure in the pain without that becoming an addictive thing, but it's like actually when we allow the pleasure so that we're not suppressing and can allow that which wishes to come to the surface, to allow pleasure in the pain means it transmutes and transforms so much quicker. Because there's a knowing, a sense of actually if I feel the pain, I know that I will find myself on the other side of it so much quicker.
I feel you, and I understand why you're saying it so gracefully. But one of the most life-changing moments of my own healing journey was understanding that every time I allow myself to feel, doesn't matter whether the feeling is sadness or anger or trauma or joy or ecstasy or pleasure, that is how my soul knows it's alive. And by connecting into that, it kind of has allowed me to connect to my soul and a bigger picture and the sheer delight that my soul has that I'm alive, even when there is a deep release of pain happening. And it makes it moves you out of judging yourself and into loving yourself. And what I see through doing a lot of shadow and trauma work with people is that it's not the pain that they can't handle as much as the judgment and fear of how they feel about certain emotions, experiences, and trauma. But the actual experience of the pain or energy moving through them is much easier than the way it makes them feel about themselves.
Absolutely.
And so anything that moves you out of that contraction of the self into an expansion is going to mean that the energy transforms much quicker. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes complete sense. And I think this is where, and I'm playing with the idea of, you know, how we can redefine and reuse words like pleasure. So it's like, if you can find the pleasure in the pain, I can then feel the excitement of knowing that I'm going to come out the other side. It's like, if I allow myself to fully experience it. And there's something about, you know, if we see the joy and the pleasure and those kind of words in the experiences that we have that may be challenging or painful, or that actually there almost isn't any room for judgment.
no. Because judgment is something that can't really happen in the present. Like, we can only really judge things in the present. We're judging what other people might think of us, or a response, which is a future thing, or judging based on things that have happened to us in the past. But in the present, there is actually only the pleasure of the experience. There is actually only the motion of the experience and the body's experience. And I kind of feel that, you know, the body teaches us how to let go. If you if you hold something in your hand and you drop it, your hand has to expand in order to let go. And one of the things that I'm really starting to understand through my own healing journey is that when I don't let go, it's because I have contracted rather than expanded into the experience. And as we're speaking, what I'm understanding is that pleasure is the expansion into the experience, which allows for the letting go. It's like your whole sense, when you come into the pleasure of it, your whole sensation body expands. Your senses open. Your chakric system opens. Your aura opens. Your emotional body opens. And whatever needs to be released just falls out like a pen falling out of your hand. But the judgment causes us to contract.
Yeah. And actually it's the judgment that creates the story, that creates the trauma that continues. And I want to be really, I can feel a part of me that doesn't want to raise this. However, I can feel, and I'm going to say this really carefully, So I can feel, so any experience that any of us have ever had, individually and collectively, that has created, or that is seen as trauma within sexuality, is because there has been a judgment placed upon it. And actually, if we were able to go back to the moment that each of those experiences took place, as you've just described, the body has an innate capacity to heal and release in the very moment that it takes place. So whether pleasure or pain, the body knows exactly what to do with it.
And if you see animals that experience human sexual trauma, if you see animals after a sexual trauma experience or a traumatic experience, they expand and they shake as a general rule. Their bodies release that trauma experience out of their system. Human beings contract generally, and that is not to, that is, deep respect to you for saying that, because I can feel how much that is a statement that challenges a lot of how we perceive what is right and wrong sexually.
And again, I want to be really mindful and careful, and I'm not dismissing anybody's experience on any level. And actually, I'm speaking from experience, and I think that's the only place I can speak from. And I'm aware of 2 instances in my life where I've had, on paper, the same experience, different stages in my life. One I received with pleasure and still judged it as wrong, and one I received as pain and judged myself as wrong. And I can, as I'm feeling into those experiences, I can feel where I had the choice in the moment to judge it as either right, wrong, good, bad. And I did. And my experiences then going forwards in my life have just built upon that judgment, that choice that I made in those moments. And therefore I can feel that the moment I allow my body to feel, to go back to those experiences and give my body the choice to make a different choice, I can immediately let go. I can immediately expand into a different knowing.
And I can also, I'm also getting emotional as I'm listening to you, because then it comes back to that numbness energy of numbness allows you to ignore the choice of your body. Numbness allows you to submit to something that is not right for you in the moment, whether it is submitting to your own or collective judgment, submitting to the experience that is right for somebody else but not right for you. It allows you not to have the divine conversation of the body. And I almost feel if that numbness wasn't running through our collective consciousness in such a pronounced way, if the boundaries of the body would then be so coherently expressed that so much sexual trauma wouldn't happen, because a no would be heard.
Yeah.
A yes would be heard. It is through the numbness that that so many boundaries are able to get crossed.
Absolutely. And I want to bring this back to what you said about it beginning with the self. And actually the numbness in my own experience doesn't have to involve someone else. So even in my own self-pleasure practice, I have overstepped my own boundaries in terms of, doing things that haven't felt right. And yet I've continued and actually just recreated trauma in my body because I haven't been listening to my own no.
Yeah.
So this doesn't have to involve anyone else. This is actually about your own, and it comes back to actually if you can't own your own no and be aware of your own numbness.
How can you give it to anybody else?
Absolutely.
How can you give your yes or your no to anybody else if you are going to ignore when your body is hungry, when your body is tired, when your body is if you are going to, it's almost like if you ignore the body, then that option to ignore it is always there. And this is not to say that there are some experiences that people have with other people that they feel totally out of control of. But in order for the collective consciousness to repair the sexual power struggle crisis that is happening as we're speaking, I believe that repair begins with the divine conversation between the body and the self.
And you're absolutely right. And actually that is as simple as honouring when your body says, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I'm whatever it might be.
Eliminating the numbness.
Yeah.
And, as we're speaking, one of the things that really came out of a journey we did to Malta was how much, at one point the group of women there came into confession about how much they had not put boundaries up in their life at subtle things. And as we were talking and as we were ceremonying and as we were working through it, we realised that actually there is a responsibility from the feminine to turn around when somebody crosses a boundary and say, actually that didn't make me feel good, as opposed to letting it go.
Yeah.
And so those boundaries get pushed and pushed and pushed in the, not with each person but in the collective. And it's part of our responsibility is to state our boundaries at all time, because sexual education is so emotionally limited at this time. It's like we have to be the educators to everyone, male, female, unity around us, about what boundaries are and what is okay and what isn't, and what is respect and what isn't, and that seeps into the collective consciousness so much. Every time there's a little every time we ignore a boundary, we create more of that numbness energy in the collective.
And actually, as you're talking, again, it's reflected with the earth. And it's like, when we don't respect her boundaries, she doesn't go into numbness, she just goes into purging and kind of responding to you're not respecting my boundaries, therefore I'm just going to show you. So there is no, so it's like it's one or the other, and it's like actually this numbness just doesn't allow for us to experience our rage, to vocalize our rage or our anger. in response to our boundaries being crossed.
It doesn't allow us to express our boundaries,
No.
because our boundaries are that rage. And
Yeah.
funnily enough, yesterday I was looking at the meaning of the praying mantis, which is like the most, across the cultures, the praying mantis is a symbol of peace and mindfulness and stillness. And yet with all of that peaceful, fully embodied action, the female praying mantis will kill and devour the male if she feels the male is going to hurt her young. And it's like that destructive part of creational energy needs to be there for the peace, needs to be there for the harmony. It's like that grace that knows that it can roar needs to be there in order for boundaries to actually be in place. And the praying mantis doesn't kill every male, kills the ones that pose a risk.
Yeah. And this comes back to what we've talked about before, which is it does begin with the feminine. You know, it is our responsibility.
I mean, if you could access that power of the female praying mantis, or the earth expressing her boundary, which ultimately you can access because you are one with nature. Really, really, somebody cannot cross that boundary with you. And I have had experiences of personally feeling like there is a threat, and being able to call upon that power in myself and see that threat, you turn away from me. I know women who have, and men who have been able to had moments where they have accessed that. I heard one woman speaking about how she was taken up a mountain by somebody who then told her he was going to kill her, and showed her a bag of shoes that of all the people that he'd taken up this mountain and killed her. It was a very, very serious situation. And she surrendered to the fact she was going to die and how beautiful it was as a place to die, and came into so much oneness that she said as he was trying to get the knife to her, he couldn't break her aura. It was like there was so much energy coming through that he couldn't actually, and he ended up walking off. And it was her spiritual awakening. But you know, for me, it was like she accessed that boundary energy that is available but she came into pleasure in order to access it. She moved out of the judgment of, oh my God, I'm going to be killed by a murderer, this is terrible, into the pleasure and the presence. And within that was her power to transcend this story as it was happening live.
And actually what I'm feeling as you're talking again is this: when we marry, when we balance the feminine and the masculine within, we come into that absolute blissful awareness of the beauty of our own sense of self, of creation, just utter oneness with the divine within as an experience. And actually it is, this is about marrying the masculine and the feminine within. The pain, the pleasure, the power, the surrender, the boundaries. It's all about finding that.
And the numbness is basically the disconnection from all of that.
Yeah.
The numbness is the thing that allows us, I mean, you know, I fully confess, every time I make a choice that is bad for the planet, such as going to a say I've forgotten my water bottle and I need water and I go and buy a plastic bottle, I go numb.
Yeah.
I go numb to the reality of what I am doing, to the choice that I know I shouldn't be making, and I allow myself to go into the disconnect, into the disconnected self.
Yeah.
I go disconnected from what that choice is making, what that choice is doing for the collective and the planet.
And isn't it interesting then that we allow ourselves to keep a part of the numbness, because it allows us to not make conscious choices all of the time.
Yeah.
So it gives us a scapegoat. It gives us...
I'm taking that one.
Well, I really didn't want to say that out loud.
I'm so taking that.
But it gives us a scapegoat. It gives us a way out of actually being fully conscious all of the time.
And this is why when you said it is not easier, this is why it is not easier.
Yeah.
Because to actually live your truth takes responsibility. Is not easy,
and it's every single moment of every single day. And
I don't always manage it now. Like as you're speaking, I'm like, I need to grieve the numbness because the numbness has been giving me a lot of convenience.
And also, you know, isn't it interesting? And I'm aware of kind of still using masculine and feminine as, you know, as words, as ways to describe even that which is within. And it's like, of course, because actually it keeps them separate. It keeps them separate. It keeps a line of numbness down the middle. And I can feel it. It's like where my plumb line of balance wants to be is where the numbness is. So it keeps my masculine and my feminine separate. And they touch every so often and create this frisson of energy of like, oh, like that, don't like that. But it's like, you know, it's like the balance line down my centre is the numbness. And so it means that I get to keep my language of masculine and feminine, and never the twain shall meet.
And then as you're speaking, I feel that the absolute realization of, which is something that keeps coming back through the work I'm doing, which is that the loss of the third gender, of the unity, of the priesty as a gender that is honoured and recognised in language, in people, the loss of that gender, which, depending on your historical view of the world, could have happened at many points, but certainly it was in all of the ancient cultures of the world and is not fully recognised until this moment in time as being a gender in the modern world. The loss of that gender is the loss of the third. It's why it's gone numb. It's like the invisibility of that unity gender in the perception of ourselves and in society has been replaced with the numbness.
And actually what I feel like we're denying as well within that, again, depending on your language, is we're denying the Holy Spirit, we're denying grace.
The Trinity.
We're denying the Trinity because we will allow, you know, we talk about Creator, Father, God a lot. We talk about Mother Earth a lot. And actually what I feel we're not doing is allowing the Spirit, the grace, which is part of what we utilize as an energy in our human form, enable us to embody Father, Mother, God.
The Tantra.
The Tantra.
The coming together of spirit and form. The coming together of male and female. The union and unity. The priesty. The Tantra. Is the point where ascension happens.
And actually, in essence, we are the Trinity.
We are
because all of that comes together within
And you know what is ascension if it isn't a move from separation into unity?
Absolutely.
And where is that separation?
Within.
And how is separation reconnected through the divine conversation within?
Oh.
Oh, amen. Woohoo. Now we have to become unnumb.
Comfortably numb. I mean, my God, what an amazing song title, Comfortably Numb. Because actually, in the discomfort, it's become comfortable.
It's so comfortable. It's so... Being numb is easier.
Yeah.
It's not better.
No, it's easier.
There's no pleasure, but it's getting away is easier. That's the point. It allows you to get away with not taking responsibility for the planet, for yourself, for your boundaries.
Yeah.
And on paper, because we've lived in societies where we've been really conditioned for thousands of years through many forms of manipulation to not be responsible. The thought of truly being responsible, like when you kind of called it out, it was like, oh, this scares me, you know? Actually not being able to get away with slipping into the illusion because it's easier, because I can't find a shop that's selling a glass bottle, or you know, it's the part of me that's lazy doesn't want to stop. That's slipping into the numbness and the illusion. But the part of me that feels, if it was fully present, couldn't go and buy that plastic bottle.
Yeah.
It's only the part of me that is able to go numb that could. That's the truth.
Yeah. And my truth is, I don't want to be numb. I want to experience, like that story of the lady at the top of the mountain. It's like, I want to experience the level of beauty that is available to us through making conscious choices and through becoming that unity within myself.
And the only way not to be numb is to feel.
Yes.
And the only way to feel is to be... The exchange is, okay, I will feel all the hard emotions, all the pain, in order to feel all of the bliss and beauty. It's like you can't... You have to be willing to feel everything and be in the pleasure of feeling everything. And I am willing to make that exchange. And it's not, and it's something that means becoming unconditioned. So it's not something that you do overnight.
No. It's
something that you have to kind of keep practicing and keep returning to and keep becoming conscious.
Yeah. It's an intention. And it's interesting because I haven't ever got to this depth before within my own awareness or knowing, and yet I've always had this sense of wanting to create balance. And I really get it now. It's like it's where we began the conversation in terms of coming into April and this idea of finding balance, and it's just like, wow, actually balance goes way beyond what I was able to articulate before.
And it's also like you want to manifest balance, a conversation that is being spoken but not listened to is unbalanced.
Yeah.
So that conversation between the body and the self can only bring balance into your reality if you are prepared to listen.
Yes. Yes. And if you wish to make that manifest in your reality, in your relationships, in your work, in your health, then it has to begin with the conversation with your body. It has to.
Who is a master of balance.
Yes.
I mean, the body is an expert at balance.
And this is the crazy thing, isn't it? It's working for us all of the time, and yet we don't see 99% of what's going on. And yet it's working for us all of the time, despite everything we throw at it.
So loyal.
Truly.
The body is so loyal. And we are so disloyal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so no wonder our lives are out of balance. And what would it look like if we were as loyal to our bodies as our bodies were to us? What would life?
Well, it's like our exchanges with friends and family would automatically become loyal.
Yeah.
Because you're not inviting any other experience into your reality.
And our exchanges with the earth and with the universe, it's like everything would become loyal.
Yeah.
And that feels so golden. It feels so sacred. I've never thought of loyalness as an intention. And now I'm really hearing that word. And hearing that word as a value,
I was just going to say it's almost become sort of synonymous for me with integrity. It's like, how can you have integrity without loyalty?
You can't. You can't, and that slipping in and out, that which I think a lot of people who are awake are doing. It's like they're awake at the spiritual workshop, and then they're busy and time pouring in their lives, and they disconnect. And fair enough, it's got to be a slow process. I totally own it in me. But as we approach this very important new moon at the time of this recording, which is really a new moon about intention for a next 7-8 year cycle, it's like, what's your intention gonna be? Are you gonna actually become loyal to all the things you know to be true?
And you know what? And I can really feel, again, the impetus, it's like there is no, I'm not going to say no value, but there is less value in being loyal to that which is outside of you, unless you're willing to be that loyal to yourself. So whatever causes, whatever you're passionate about, and I hear this said and time and time again, but I'm really getting it within this conversation at a deeper level. It's like there is no point, very little, there is less point, because there's less energy going into it actually. If you are not willing to be that loyal, that caring, that nurturing, that nourishing, that loving towards yourself, then the causes that you are engaged in are only receiving the tiniest percentage of what's available.
And they're receiving the tired self.
And they're receiving the tired self.
And they're receiving the self that is out of integrity. And they are receiving the disconnected, separate self.
Yep.
So loyalty, and in fact loyalty to others, that comes from a place of disconnect within the self, or from a place that isn't doing it in integrity within the self, that is the misuse of loyalty energy, and that can lead to a massive amount of abuse, relationship dynamic.
Because actually it's coming from the numbness.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from the place that isn't willing to integrate everything within the self before it goes out in order to receive.
And here's the thing about pleasure. If you come into pleasure, if you transcend the numbness, and I've had moments of feeling it, that is when you come from overflow. That is when you actually are giving from fullness. So full that it is flowing out of you, as opposed to giving from lack, as opposed to giving from separation and numbness.
And actually, you know, when you say flow, it's like it goes up the center of my being, and the only way that it can go up the center of my being is if I am fully integrated and become that third entity that we were talking about. Then it's just a clear channel of energy.
Yeah. And how, you know, how much do so much giving is love, is fear dressed up as love. So much giving is fear or numbness dressed up as love. And as I'm speaking it, I'm imagining like giving a gift to somebody that is like those boxes under the display trees with nothing in
it. Yeah.
Like it's dressed up as a gift, but there is no actual energy inside of it because you are depleted or you are numb. Whereas when you, it's funny we're talking about gifting, when you actually gift from that divine Trinity self, then you are gifting everything.
And therefore you are receiving.
I feel like this conversation spoke to my nervous system. Like it spoke to the part of my body that is sensation. Not just my nervous system, but my senses and my energetic nervous system and my sensual connective body, because as we're approaching the end of this conversation, it's like I am feeling in a different way.
Yeah, and I can feel those parts of my body that are kind of like, okay, this is, I'm unsure, actually. It's not a yes, no, don't like. It's like, it's an unsure. It's like, oh, this is new. Or this is a remembering.
And it is a remembering. It's funny, we're both sitting here with our palms like wide open, like feeling, like feeling as a physical statement. And it's not comfortable. And yet I'm through the wisdom of this conversation inviting the pleasure in the discomfort and the excitement.
And the pleasure and the excitement within those parts of me that feel like it doesn't know. And as you say, with the wisdom of this conversation, is inviting my body to make the choices without my judgment. So it's like actually inviting my body, and it comes back to integration and giving my body the space it needs to integrate without my mind wanting to judge what's going on, to make it right, wrong, good, bad, but simply to allow and expand.
And actually, with that invitation of yours, the first thing my body is asking for is stillness.
Yeah.
It's like, let me arrive in this.
Yeah.
Can we go quiet so I can figure this out? You know, when you're trying to work out how to do something and someone's talking in your ear and you're like, please, please be quiet so I can work this out. It's like, that's what my body wants.
Yeah. And so actually I really want to say, to anyone that's listening, whilst this isn't necessarily wouldn't necessarily say this in a cafe conversation, I do want to invite that if you're listening, to take that stillness after listening. Gift yourself that time.
And 5 minutes of it being properly that stillness is so much more valuable than an hour of not gifting it to yourself.
Yeah.